Hello and welcome to Kashmir, The Road to Progress, a special series on WION. Kashmir is famous for its cultural heritage. It dates back centuries. It's reflected in its monuments, crafts and living traditions. Wherever you go, you can see tradition blended with modernity. The youth in particular are coming up with new ideas to make their heritage more appealing to youngsters. To discuss this, joining me today are four such people. To begin with, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Usman and I'm the Managing Director and General Manager of Hotel Downtown and Little Persia. I am a proud modern-day Kashmiri.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Bisma Parvez. I'm a research scholar from Malaysia and an artist by passion.
My name is Zoya Khan. I'm an architect and a city planner based in Kashmir, and my primary area of interest revolves around the cultural heritage of Kashmir.
Hi, my name is Zubair Kirmani. I'm a founder of a brand, Bonipan. After 15 years, I have moved back to the valley to explore local crafts.
How are you adopting the Pashmina tradition to today's modern world?
See, we have an experience of more than 15 years to convert the garments and work with different crafts. So luckily I got a chance to move back to Kashmir, and we've been doing lots of R&D rather than engineering the fabric, which people earlier thought of inspiring or existing, they use it as it is. For us, we want to take it beyond what's existing right now. So there's going to be lots of developments happening, and we try different things. And definitely we have a vision towards Pashmina to make it more modern and more acceptable to our youth and have a different acceptance globally. And we definitely are trying to get more product developments as well, because it's not going to be limited to our shawls and other things. Because for Kashmir, stitching itself is a very new concept. So we're bringing in more construction to the Pashmina, and we'll definitely come up with more products in coming future.
So I know for you, you went outside and you came back, but you opened a business which is very much Kashmiri looking, like the interiors look super Kashmiri. Yeah. You didn't bring in like outside influence and build, a Canadian business. You built a Kashmiri business.
That's right. Well, I was a small kid when my parents, because of the militancy, they moved to Delhi. And from there on out, every year I would come back for vacations, once a year, maybe for 2 months or so. I was pretty much fascinated with my roots all the time because I stayed away from it. Yeah. And I never knew, I traveled across the world, I was in New Delhi for, the longest period of time, and then I was in Canada. And the moment I came back, my family insisted that I should start up a business over here. And I wanted to, I was tasked with the hotel project, but I wanted to fabricate it, and engineer it in such a way that it should reflect our roots. It's not like some modern day hospitality venture I just want to come up with. I wanted something to, really stand apart. When the guests from outside and the tourists, they come here, the moment they walk inside my property, they should feel connected with Kashmir. They should not feel like they just walked into any other 4-star, 5-star hotel in any other part of India or maybe the world. I wanted to stand apart with that. So that was basically the whole idea.
I'm curious about what are the inspirations for your art, Bisma?
Yeah, my inspiration is completely Kashmir, because I started from Kashmir-based art only. And it was not like from the childhood I was doing art. I think after 2010 I got inspired to do something that gives me the feeling of fulfillment, like representing my unique culture, our traditions. So I started from art. I started doing artwork, even if I was doing engineering at that time. But I think creativity is a part of Kashmiris, because we have a lot of creative things around. So we get inspired from this. So I started from painting. I did completely exclusively Kashmir-based art. I used to paint Kashmiri tradition, or whatever we have, paper mache art, wood carving art, in different forms. And the main basic thing was that I wanted to represent Kashmir to the whole of the world. I wanted to show the world that Kashmir has got a lot of good things, and I did that through art.
When I came to Kashmir the first time, the first thing I noticed was actually the architecture. So I'm coming to you, Zoya. I'm thinking, what are you doing to preserve the architecture, these old buildings in Kashmir, so that this tradition stays alive?
So I think primarily my area of interest revolves around the architectural built heritage as well as the cultural heritage of Kashmir, because Kashmir has a very unique context in that sense. So if you talk about the building traditions, if you talk about the craftsmanship, if you talk about response to climate, things like that, Kashmir has always been a melting pot of so many cultures, and there are so many traditions that were followed. So I think it's an interesting time to study and look back, because it's a pivotal point. We have access to new things, we have access to different kind of money, and our aspirations are changing as human beings. So I feel that it's a pivotal point in the history of at least the architectural history and the way the urban morphology of the city is changing.
How about the pashminas? Is there a difference in between, say, Kashmiri pashmina and pashmina in general? Is there such, like, can you say that the Kashmiri pashmina is like the highest quality pashmina that you can get?
When I traveled throughout the Europe, mostly they call it as Kashmir, and the making process is more mechanized. So it loses its essence, its strength, and so many good qualities. Whereas in Kashmir pashmina, as you know, we get a GI patent now. You know, it's a GI indication now we have a stamp on that. That indicates it's 100% handmade. So it's all the good qualities remain there. So that's what we're trying to promote.
It's one of those things people tell me, oh, you're in Kashmir, you have to get me a pashmina shawl. It's like one of those.
But you need to get more genuine people, because lots of mix happening in the market. And I think local government is quite working hard towards it to retain the essence of pashmina so that more people get the genuine pashmina. Apart from that, while I traveled a lot, and we are gifted with lots of craft. It's not just pashmina, it's about how you mold it further. So we have Sozni, we have Ari, we have weaving techniques. Literally there are more than 10-15 techniques, which makes it unique than any other region across globe.
How Kashmir has been changing in the last few years. Have you noticed anything with your business? Have you gotten more business in recent years, or has it become a more like conducive climate to do business in recent years in Kashmir?
It actually has. I would like to agree with you here. And I've been noticing like major changes on ground for the past couple of years. And like many things have factored in to boost up that process. So there, like, after 370, more after that, in fact, like, I've been seeing like many people embracing a lot of new changes, which are actually good for the community in general. The kind of changes that would trickle down and help everyone progress and move on.
You're doing a PhD in Malaysia at the moment. So after you're finished, are you going to stay in Malaysia? Because I've seen a lot of people say go to Delhi, study in Delhi, and then like set up shop there, and then they don't come back to their community. Are you planning to come back to Kashmir?
Yes, definitely I'm planning to come back, because my basic thing going to Malaysia was like exploring what different countries have other than Kashmir. I wanted to see how people perceive Kashmir as. Because in Malaysia also I'm doing, even if I'm doing art, but I'm doing Kashmir based art. Because I don't want to change myself, because there is something inside me I can't change. That is my roots. The roots I'm connected with. So I think I have a strong connection with Kashmir. I can't stay there for long, but I'm going to learn a lot from there, and I want to come Kashmir and just change something that we need to.
When you speak to other people in Malaysia, what is the perception they have of Kashmir?
There are many people who never knew what Kashmir is about till 19. But after the abrogation of Article 370, there are many people who know about Kashmir. But I don't want them to look on that side of Kashmir. I want them to look about the creativity, about our tradition, about our culture, and what unique things we have in Kashmir.
When it comes to the buildings being built right now, it seems like a lot of the new buildings are being built are like modern buildings. So I'm curious, are anybody continuing the tradition of this old architecture? Is there any new construction like that at all? Or?
There is nothing wrong per se in going towards a new direction. I think as humans we are designed to innovate, and the time changes, the context changes, people's access to things changes. So there is nothing wrong in that per se. So I think like this aversion that we have to modernity per se is something that is heavily criticized. I think as long as you're sensitive to what your actual building traditions are, and as long as there is a continuity in what your identity markers are, I think when it's done in a sensitive fashion, there is nothing, it has to be a fine balance between everything. So right now I think the problem really lies in how there is such a big disjoint between these things. And like for craftsmanship to flourish, patronage is really important. So even if you were willing to make a house in the vernacular architectural style per se, you wouldn't necessarily find it very economical, or you would not necessarily find the right craftsmen who are still willing to experiment with the, with the old materials. So in that sense, there is definitely a disjoint. And I think, like, in terms of people's aesthetic sensibilities also, I think we are really so influenced by so many other factors. We're consuming so much visual information, and even the way the pandemic changed the world. The way we are interacting with the built environment has completely changed. The way we are personalizing these spaces, the way we interact with our own houses has completely changed our viewpoint on how we really live and inhabit the spaces that we're interacting with so closely. So I think in that sense, I do feel that there is a discontinuity, and I don't feel like there is a lot of interest in terms of people exploring the same continued traditions.
So what will happen with that? Does that mean that the buildings that are there will just eventually get demolished and a new construction will come up and it will lose kind of its soul, Srinagar? Or does that mean that the buildings that are there will have to have like a heritage stamp on it and it will need to be preserved properly?
Well, I'm afraid so. We're definitely in a very critical juncture of time in that sense, because there is very little incentive for the people who are living in these houses to retain them. Then as far as the people who are making new houses and the way the urban, because when you talk about houses and the style of architecture, you're not looking at individual buildings per se. These buildings will eventually determine the overall character or the urban morphology or the urban design of an entire space. So in that sense, there is definitely a lack of protection status for these heritage structures. And I think there are the guidelines and bylaws are also really lax. So, like in terms of a standardization in terms of the materials that people use, all of those things are definitely lacking, I feel.
I'm curious about the embroidery that you're using in the dresses that you've designed. It's kind of a traditional pattern and a traditional style, could you say?
See, we've been practicing in Kashmir. If you see the local market, there are some fixed designs which are mostly around the neck or some borders. So that is easily practiced, and people have access to that design bank which is commonly being used. Whereas our way of using is to contemporize it, use different designs, and even the silhouette is not just the pattern what most of the people are wearing. So we're trying to use the local craft and make the silhouettes more global and more acceptable, because we've been doing that lots of women's wear, men's wear, so we know how to tweak the embroideries and keep the essence of the craft alive.
Do you think that that is the way that it is going to survive, to apply it to modern design?
I think any change is needed for things to remain same. If we don't change, otherwise people will start forgetting it.
Yeah.
So we have to take very sensitive steps and very careful steps to take it to the next level. Otherwise, we don't want to spoil the art. Just, it should not just be stagnant at one place.
When it comes to Kashmiri food, I've had a lot of different Kashmiri food. Before I visited Kashmir, I would go into a tourist restaurant and order a Kashmiri biryani. And he would have some dried fruits and nuts on it, and in my mind that was Kashmiri food, all right? So I came over here and I realized, I had like this realization that I've actually never had Kashmiri food until I came here. So where does the food, the culinary traditions come from?
To be honest, you have to trace it back to a very, very long time in history. Initially, the Mongols came over, then came the Uzbeks, and then came the Turks. They brought their own set of the way they prepare their diets and everything. And after that, the longest ever rule that was presided over in Kashmir, because of which because of which Islam majorly followed that rule, was the Persian rule, and their representative was Shah Hamdan. And it's a part of our history and culture as well. So our food was pretty much a fusion of this entire cuisines that came over in separate time frames of history, and was ultimately compiled and was fit into our culture by the Iranians or the Persians.
So what's a must-try dish, for all of you? If you're going to give me an advice, you have to have this one dish, what's your favorite dish?
I would say pretty much Rogan Josh.
Oh, that's already I've tried that. That is one of my favorites. I know what I'm getting, and it's lovely. What if you give me a food recommendation? Which one would you go?
I think most of the people like tabak mas.
Tabak mas.
Yeah, ribs.
That is a part of the waswan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that the ribs?
Yep.
Yeah, ribs, fried.
I'd go with Rogan Josh.
Yeah, Rogan Josh.
I recommend the same
Yeah.
tabak mas. It's
Yeah.
more crispy and it has got its
It's
own
very
flavor.
delicious.
Well, we all have the
Cooking.
same sense of flavor, I think.
Yes.
'Cause out of the whole was one, that was my favorite meal, like the tabak mas. And the Rogan Josh is like if I go to a restaurant, I'll have a
Yes,
Rogan
that
Josh.
should be the
because
first one.
It's like that richness of the flavor is super.
It's like the staple restaurant diet, if you ask me about it.
You can get it everywhere, like
Anywhere.
tabak mas, like good luck, you know.
Yes.
It's very hard to find.
And it's actually better to try it out at different spots because they
Yeah.
have their own different preparations.
For the Rogan Josh.
For the Rogan Josh itself, yeah. It tastes different in different places. Yeah. There's a varied experience in the same item that you can try out.
That's the secret of the spices.
Even in terms of food, if you're speaking about food, and that's the syncretic cultural tradition of Kashmir, that if you look at it in isolation, it might have it's not just a culinary experience as something else. It's also about how people come together and have a meal, and people share a meal on a plate together. And
Yeah.
four people who might come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, who might be different in terms of their status, wealth, etc. But everybody is equal, and in that sense, they come and they share their food. So it's very symbolic in that sense also.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a very important cultural tradition in anything, and it manifests itself in very unique ways in everything. So that also is linked to the climate, quite frankly, because if you were talking about like how it's so meat centric,
Yeah.
because we didn't really grow vegetables for major part of the year, and you know we had
Right.
access to vegetables, and that's why we had a lot of dried vegetables that people were consuming, and people were indoors. So even in the way we have personalized our spaces inside and how we live and the clothes we wear, the kind of ornamentation, the way these roles are attributed to different genders are also all in response to the specific context. So the climate had a very important role to play, the geography, the topography had a very important role to play. So it's interesting because when he's talking about food, he spoke about a coloring agent. So in that sense, and even when she was talking about her art practices, you are, as a Kashmiri, you're like just exposed to different seasons. So you're like, it's like walking through this giant color palette. How does one escape being in that? So you're sensitized to this from a very early age. So you know, these practices just are deeply embedded, and these things that we see all around just percolate into our aesthetic sense from very early on, I feel.
For you, Bisma, you're studying and you're doing art on the side. Is that like are you like conflicted in that sense? It's like you're going for engineering and that's what you want to do, but your heart is in art? Or because in the West it's almost the opposite, that like if your heart is in art, you go for that 100% and you don't do engineering.
I was passionate from the very beginning about engineering, but I think art is a part of my life. It is not my life. I have different things, like I am passionate about different things in my life. Art is one part, engineering is another. I can't mingle the two.
Is it common for women to study engineering in Kashmir, or are you like the only girl in the class, or like how is it done?
This is very strange when we talk about mechanical engineering, because I was being told when I was interested in engineering, I was being told that you're a girl, like you shouldn't pursue mechanical engineering. Tomorrow you have to work with boys, like it's not encouraged. At that time it wasn't encouraged for a girl to pursue mechanical engineering.
Do you think that is changing? Do you think that people are like getting more and more open to follow your dreams?
Yes, it's changing in education field as well as in artistic field.
I'm curious about these clay tiles that I've heard you talk about, Soya. These clay tiles are like very colorful and beautiful, but I heard that there's only one family left that are doing this art.
I was exposed to these tiles years ago, and then I started paying close attention to it, and it really troubled me that it's very easy. It's not easily available in the market. So I saw that these tiles were being used in certain places, but I couldn't really trace it down to some place where it could be easily available. And then while researching that and looking for some materials to be used and executed in a certain project that I wanted to implement, I finally found out that there's only one surviving family in Kashmir that really does it. So in that sense, I feel like we really are at a critical juncture, because we are not really in sync with where the craftsmen, and there is no upgradation of infrastructure. There is no change in the design vocabulary, like he was talking about, you know, even in clothes or even in craftsmanship or even in architectural practices. So that disjoint is really creating a space where it is disincentivizing the craftsmen to, you know, like stop following the crafts. And I think the economics of it also has a huge role to play in that. with the access to materials like vitrified tiles and marble, I mean, it's shocking. I don't understand why as Kashmiris, we have marble floors and granite floors in our houses when we have access to these. So the long-term goal really, as an individual for myself, is to see at least this one craft being revived and to introduce it back into the market. So even if I do it at a small level, I'm hoping eventually it will lead to some continuation.
Yeah. So I think it's our duty to maybe adapt a village, adapt few people, take care of their livelihood, maybe put their names as well as, they need to get recognized for that. Let us take the risk. They cannot afford to take a risk. So that's our job. People have been just playing with their art, their hands, golden hands. Just did a project in Leh, which was again related to Pashmina. So we upgraded their skills and to know more about their own Pashmina. So I myself got so influenced. We are now installing a couple of hand looms, which is a traditional 500-year-old loom, which is a very small investment. So I'm installing a couple of them maybe in the next week. So, I could see the developments we can do because we never tried things. So, we need to have that design bank, maybe a way forwards, how it's going to look after 5 years, 10 years. Because most of our good buyers or clients, they already have enough of Kashmiri Pashmina, Sozni, Kani shawls. They also need to see now freshness happening to the same craft.
What are your favorite parts of Kashmiri culture?
You go out in the morning, you see sunrise, daytime it's a different mood, and sunset has a different mood. So you never get bored with same thing. So that's the beauty about it. And the best part is the air, what you breathe. The moment you come from any other state and you feel the lightness in the air. So it could be any part, just get lost into the forest and spend some time. There's lake, there are streams, and even the way people live, support each other. I think that's the biggest thing I like about it.
If you ask me about it, you cannot just make music with one octave. You cannot just use one color to paint a picture. Kashmir is a culture. There's different small pockets of that culture, but on and all, you gotta embrace Kashmir in itself. Just the way you gotta use the whole set of octaves, the whole set of colors to complete your picture, complete your song, the same way you gotta embrace Kashmir as a whole, as a culture itself. Otherwise, you're not complete. There's many things you can explore, many things. One cannot just stick to one. Oh, I like the food, but I don't like the
That's a very good
way,
point, actually.
I think people don't come now with those preconceived notions of what this place has to be like. I think people are also considered as individual people now, and everybody can, Kashmir offers those diverse interests to people. So whether it is adventure, whether it is culture, whether it is architecture, whether it is craft, food, music, culinary experiences, any of these things, heritage, all of these things are just spread all over the place. And I think Kashmir in that sense is a perfect blend of so many of these things, and everything is interwoven. So even if you experience one element, you're still experiencing Kashmir in its entirety in that sense.
In order for the culture of Kashmir to really flourish, is there anything that you would like to see, in terms of initiatives or policy?
Well, to begin with, preservation of whatever our tradition and history is, that is essential. It has to be preserved. It has to be passed, just the way she was talking about that one person who was manufacturing tile. That art has to go down to a different generation in order for its preservation. Otherwise, one part of our culture is going to be lost. One part of that art is going to be lost.
There are many artisans who know a wonderful paper mache art, but they are stopping because they are not getting financially benefits from this artwork. So I think we need to take this forward. We need to introduce this to other countries as well. We need to acknowledge people who are doing this type of art. Even if, for example, if we have to, even if there is a loss on our part, if we encourage them, we should do so.
So you have to take pride in your own architectural traditions, in your own building traditions, in your own craft traditions, and also constantly educate yourself. That's the first step towards, I think, innovation. Once you're aware about what already exists, only then will you be able to make a valuable contribution.
Now everybody wants to know how things are made, how your clothes are made. So once you get the experience, so you have a better value for your product as well. And as you know, Kashmir itself is a brand globally, and there are so many people make fake products out of it, just selling it because it resembles Kashmir. So people get more educated about what's handmade and what's Pashmina. So that will help us to grow as a brand as well, because now things are changing.
Well, I want to thank all of you guys for coming. It's been very interesting to get to know more about Kashmiri culture and where it's going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That concludes today's episode of Kashmir, The Road to Progress.